Hi guys. The purpose of this video, maybe two videos, basically in the last unit, in the Busy Bee unit, we talked a little bit about photosynthesis, but I want to get into a little bit more detail for things that you need to know about that process. The previous unit focused a lot on cellular respiration, but in all reality, photosynthesis is just as complex. Now, we're not going to dive into the detail that we did for respiration, but I would like to just kind of do an overview of photosynthesis and talk a little bit about some of the processes that occur during photosynthesis. So, photosynthesis is where autotrophs, basically organisms that can make their own food, use water and carbon dioxide to create glucose. Okay? And what this process does is transfers radiant energy from the sun into bond energy of glucose. And then we talked about it before, but most other organisms, most heterotrophs, are going to use this glucose and transfer that bond energy in glucose and make ATP. So photosynthesis is needed to do respiration. Okay, and actually, the same is true backwards as well. But the equation we already talked about. You take CO2, you take H2O, you get glucose, and you get oxygen. Okay, so carbon dioxide and water gives you glucose and oxygen. And you use light in here. Light energy is the energy that's going to be transformed from light energy into chemical bond energy. Okay, so this is the overall kind of summary of what photosynthesis does. Now we're going to get into a little bit more detail, though, about some of the different. So back to the equation part. You should probably fill that in. I forgot to mention that, but you have 6 CO2s plus 6 H2Os. You could write light if you want. Above that, give you glucose and oxygen. Okay. Now, on your paper, it also says photosynthesis is important to life because on Earth, most organisms use the glucose in order to produce ATP during respiration. Okay, and this oxygen is also a very, very important byproduct because the oxygen is then what other organisms then use to help do respiration. So they use the glucose and the oxygen, and then these are the byproducts. So you can see that they're interchangeable. Inverses of each other, and we talked about that last section. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about, let's see here, so, first of all, and you can see on your notes, the equation on your notes, we should probably write that in. So the equation, I want to talk a little bit about the ways that the plant gets the water and carbon dioxide that's needed. So the water actually comes from the roots. A lot of people think that the water comes from rain hitting leaves and it absorbs water, but the water itself actually comes from the ground, comes from the roots, and goes up tubes called xylem. Okay, and we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier in the year, but due to adhesion and cohesion, the water kind of just goes up and gets pulled up and goes right from the ground all the way up to the leaves and into the cells of the leaves, and then can be used for photosynthesis. Okay, so the water goes up through xylem. The carbon dioxide, though, that obviously comes in the air, and this picture here shows kind of the structure on how this carbon dioxide gets in. So within, this is a zoomed in picture with the microscope. You see these things right here. These are called stomatas or stomas. And basically a stoma is a little pore right here. And there's two cells on the outside called guard cells. That's what this is, and that's what this is. And the guard cells can either open or close. And if they open the stoma, what happens is the CO2 can come in. And this is where CO2 comes in, and it's also where oxygen goes out. Okay? So, but they can also close it. And they close it because the plant can actually lose some water through here as well, and sometimes the plant needs to conserve water. So if they close it, then the plant conserves water. So in the summertime, when plants are hot and starting to wilt, they basically close these, and then it can conserve more water. So the stomata or stoma are little pores, and you can kind of see this is a diagram that shows that. So this is how the CO2 enters and gets into that leaf in order to do photosynthesis. Okay, so obviously the water goes up to the xylem, the CO2 comes in through the stoma, and the guard cells can open or close. Basically the way they open or close, the vacuole that you can see here, basically like a big storage tank, when that is swollen and full of water, it forces it open. When that shrinks and loses water, it closes back up. Okay, so again, stomata, how CO2 gets in, water, how the water gets up to the leaves through xylem. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. The next one that we're going to talk is going to talk a little bit about the different stages that are involved.